Hey, what's up, folks? I felt compelled to make a video series on sex education. I guess I'd put it like the way I've been thinking about it is sex education for adults. And I guess I say that because when I think back to my life, I never really received actual sex education. Like, yes, I took health classes in middle school and high school, and I did learn about putting a condom on, which is a useful skill. And even now, I get it backwards sometimes. It can be tricky. Um, but anyways, there's just so much to sex and sexuality and connection to one's own sexuality and how one expresses their sexuality and how to actually merge sexually with another person in a way that feels fulfilling and expressed and consensual and communicative to both to both parties. There's so much in there that there's no place where we're taught that. And maybe I'll get into it in the course of these videos as to why I felt compelled over the last many years to go on my own research journey into my own sexuality, both experientially and reading and taking classes, etc. And I wanted to provide in this video series some fruits of my harvest. And who this video series would be for, I can imagine three camps of people. One are people who just want to improve their sex life, just like straight up. Maybe their sex life is boring or uninspired or doesn't feel important to them and they want it to feel more important. That's totally valid. If you just want a better sex life, I think this information would benefit you. Second camp are people who, this is different phrasing, but it might apply to some, but who want to progress along their sexual journey. I know not everybody thinks about life in terms of it being a journey, but I actually quite like that word because it has this implication that, like, there's nowhere really to get. It's just, like, level after level of growth and development and transformation and learning about oneself. And the way I view it is life in and of itself is a greater journey. Like, I'm on a journey learning about myself and how I can give back to humanity and tap into my own gifts. But within the greater journey of life, I also view it as there's all these sub-journeys, and each one is kind of a portal into the greater journey. So, like, I am on a sexual journey. I've dedicated myself to seeing what's in there and going all the way in. I'm also on, like, a meditation journey. Like, meditation's been a big part of my life for years and probably will continue to be so. I have a journey with dance. Dance is a big part of my life and continues to evolve, etc., etc. And so everyone has different, in my viewpoint, different journeys that they're on. And for some people, for whatever reason, because of interest or curiosity or trauma or healing, sexuality is a journey that they care about. So I'm hoping this video series will also help those people progress along their own sexual journey. And then the third camp of person is people who, it's related to the second camp, but there's a little bit of a different nuance, which I would say people who are looking for their truth and are using sexuality as a portal to get there. And so for that camp of people, I think that this work, or at least the way I approach this work, and I'm hoping that this video series also can provide some insights and ideas for people to begin or continue to dismantle all of the conditioning they have around their own sexuality in order to find out what's really there. Like, what is your actual sexual essence and sexual expression if you take off all the shoulds, all the obligations, all the cultural shit, all the family shit, all the fear, like, all the shit that gets piled on. If you dismantle and remove all of that, like, what is actually there? It's funny, I'm watching myself record and I like these gesticulations. I feel I do this a lot, which is nice. That kind of looks like I have boobs. Anyways, so hopefully this video will be a benefit to all three of those types of camps of people. So for this first one, let's see, I'm already 4 minutes in. Okay, perfect. For this first one, I want to talk about what sex even is. That feels like a good place to start. And my hope is that any of these videos will be standalone. And I have an idea for about 21 videos. I'm hoping, I don't know how many I'll do, somewhere between 10 and 20 probably. And I'll introduce myself now too. My name is Mike Mantell. I'm a sex educator, and just exploring the depths of my own sexuality has been my calling, largely because that's where most of my trauma is and has been. And so I've been, to lead a healthy and explorative life, I've been forced to open all of it up. And I'm just insanely curious, and sexuality is the portal I've chosen to just, like, go all the way in. And that was another nice gesticulation. That was, like, so So my name is Mike. I'm a sex educator, and that's my hope. My hope is to speak to all of those kinds of people. People who just want to improve their sex life, people who want to move along their sexual journey, or people who want to dismantle their conditioning to see what's the truth of their sexual expression. So what is sex? I think at least one helpful way to conceive of sex is that it is an energy and not an act. Like, the way that we're taught about sex is that sex refers to penetrative sex, where one party is inserting some part of their body in the other person's body. One body's going to another body. So either dick and butt or dick and vagina. Those are, I guess, like the two main ways that sex is referred to culturally. And that paradigm is so limited and unhelpful. And there's so many reasons why. But let me just start and say that I think it's helpful to view sex as an energy. So what do I mean when I say energy? Well, I would describe an energy as like a pocket and combination of feelings in the body. That's a pretty good like blanket description. So for example, like I could say anger is an energy. Like we all know what it's like to feel angry, and you can imagine like what if you could just summon anger, like you could right now. You could just be like, you can like, I don't know if you felt that, but I was just like charging it up Super Saiyan level. You can like ignite anger. You can ignite sadness. You can ignite boredom. Like all these states of being or states of consciousness that you reside in, you can ignite at any time. And I would say sexual energy is a state of being, a state of consciousness that you're in. It's a way that your body feels. All it is a way that your body feels. So if your dick is getting hard or your pussy is getting wet, then you are experiencing sexual energy. Okay? Like, it's that simple. It's arousal in the body. Like, we all know what it feels like to be horny, to be turned on. I'm just going to say that is sexual energy. When you're feeling that in your body. Just like we all know what it's like to feel angry or sad. Like, we all know what it's like to feel like, Okay, so why do I think that distinction is helpful? Because when you look at sex that way, where sex is an energy and not an act, it opens up this whole world of freedom and creativity that you can engage with with which you can engage with sexuality. So, okay, two places I want to go with this. First one is, that means that let's say you're doing something with your partner. As long as you and your partner are both feeling aroused and are feeling the sexual energy, for all I'm concerned, that's sex. Because here's the thing. I'm sure many of you can relate to the experience of, I've had plenty of penetrative sex that totally sucked. Like, I wasn't feeling turned on. I wasn't feeling horny. My partner was certainly not feeling it either. It was just like, I can go into this later in videos if like I want to talk about my history more, if it feels relevant. In a nutshell, when I was in college, I was in a fraternity. I was really sexually repressed. I had a ton of drunken sexual encounters, and like felt like there was this bar I had to hit of to be the man. I had to have a bunch of sex that I didn't want to be having. And so I've had so many encounters where I was doing the thing that we're supposed to be doing, whether it's like intercourse or getting a blowjob or whatever, and I wasn't enjoying it. Like, I wasn't feeling sexual charge in my body, and the thing was happening to me, or I was doing the thing. And so anyways, if we can conceive of sex as an energy and not an act, then it frees us from having to be performative in some way that we're supposed to be with another person, and instead, we can interact with that person in a way that's just mutually pleasurable. Sorry, one second. There's something that popped up on my screen here. We can engage in a way that's mutually pleasurable and mutually satisfying sexually. One example that comes to mind for this, there's a lot I can speak on this too. I'd like to wrap up in 5 minutes. Is I had a friend when I was traveling, and I met her in Guatemala, and she was a really interesting person. And she was telling me this story about how she worked on death row, doing an interview series. She was like interviewing people on death row to get to know them, and just to hear what the experience of somebody who was about to die, like what's that experience like. And she met somebody who they started to flirt and have a sexual connection develop, but he was unable to leave wherever he was on the death row, and so they couldn't engage physically. But they developed a connection over the phone. And what ended up happening was they were having these phone calls that were like really hot and sexual. And because they both knew he was about to die, they were completely unfiltered and unrestrained, and they were just saying all the things. It was like there was this direct connection from their genitalia. It was just like this sexual floodgate was opening out of them with no filter, out of their mouth, speaking things and then interacting in that way with this complete free flow of sexual exchange just through talking on the phone. Now, I'm sure that sexual exchange is way more satisfying and gratifying than so many intercourses people are having out there, like penetrative intercourse, because they're both in the flow and they're feeling each other, and they were in tune with the dance of sexual energy happening back and forth. Because that's ultimately what sex is, too. It's a dance. I have a sexual energy, things get aroused. You have a sexual energy, things get aroused for you. How can we have those two energies communicate with each other in a way where they're both getting fed? And I'll get into communication skills and tools later on. But that's ultimately how I view it. Like, how can your sexual energy interact with another person's sexual energy so that both of them are getting fully expressed consensually? Yes. Anything else I want to say there? I guess one footnote that I'll also return to later is you can have a sexual experience with yourself, too. Like, I'll go into self-pleasure practices and erotic imagination later, but there's a way to find what your own sexual energy is and figure out how to cultivate and learn to let that express itself just by yourself in the way that it wants to. And that does not include porn. I mean, it could include porn, but it doesn't have to include porn. And that can be really helpful to get to know your own sexual energy and how it wants to express itself if you want to interact with a partner, because then you get to know this better when these are interacting. And it's just gratifying and informative in and of itself to have self-pleasure practice. And, okay, the last thing I'll say is, this is the last thing I'll say. Viewing sex as an energy, one other reason that it's useful is because you can combine energies when you're interacting with another person. So, for example, let's say sexuality is just one raw energy. But I find, at least for me, often other pockets of energy or emotion go together with sexual energy. So, another type of energy is fight energy, like combative energy. And I think we all know what that feels like. It's like, there's like two things coming against each other. I find that for me, often when I open that up and combine it with sexual energy, they just go really well together. So, like, I love being in situations with partners where we're wrestling, or we're like, kind of like scratching and biting and clawing. There's something like that raw animalistic fight energy and that sexual energy go really well together for me. But everyone has their own combinations they like or that get activated for them. And there are plenty of other combinations too. Like, I had one partner, I guess she was more of a friend than a partner, but we explored some intimacy, and like the main thing was sadness. Every time we opened like the sexual channel between us, it would just be sad. Tears would come out. There was some reason in that connection that like the energy of sadness and the energy of sexuality were merged. And again, it can merge with anything. Like any emotion you can think of, it can merge with sexuality. Any relational dynamic you can think of, it can merge with sexuality. And sex is really interesting because you can use sexual energy as a way to actually unlock other energies that are stuck inside of you. Because it's such a strong force, you can just like blast through the floodgates and then let all these other interesting energies and like blocked information come through. And again, pretty much everything I talked on, I will go into more detail in future videos. But I just wanted to lay the groundwork for viewing sex as an energy and not an act. So that means that a sexual exchange can look like anything as long as it feels good for both people and as long as it's consensual. And one last thing I'll say about sex as an act and why that's detrimental is because when we view the goal of any sexual relationship to be intercourse, and then the goal of intercourse to be ejaculation, dude, that's like, it's just setting yourself up to have a shitty experience. It's setting yourself up to have a shitty experience. And don't get me wrong, like, intercourse is fucking great. It can feel wonderful. And ejaculation is like the best feeling in the world. I'm a big fan of both of those things. and I don't want to shame either of those things. But the only point I'm making is when the goal, the only or the main goal is intercourse, and then the main goal of that is ejaculation. Like, think about culturally, we're taught first base is kissing, second base is manual stimulation, third base is oral stimulation, and then home run is sex. Sex as intercourse. Like, dude, that is, first of all, that framework is programmed into us. And the reason that's setting us up for unpleasant sexual interactions is, like, think of it this way. If you're reading a book and your only goal is to get to the end of a book, nothing will be enjoyable until you get to the end, right? That's one example. Another example is, like, I'm sure we've all been with those people when you're on a hike and their only goal is to get to the summit. And on the hike itself, they're having a miserable time. They're just trudging with their head down. They're just trying to get there. It looks like they're in, like, well, that's probably not a politically appropriate thing to say. Okay, scratch that. But it looks like they're working super hard and, like, really pushing themselves and not enjoying themselves. Then they get to the top and they're like, oh, the summit, great. And the point I'm making is, like, yes, the summit is great. I love the summit. But if you can create a way of viewing life and sexuality as, like, walking through the shrubs is just as enjoyable as any other part of the journey or as being at the summit, then you're set up to enjoy every part of the process and to find what you actually like. Because maybe you're not actually a summit person. Maybe you like the summit every now and then, but maybe what you really like is swimming at the watering hole that's halfway up the mountain. Or maybe what you really like is just the act of hiking through dirt. Like, I think you probably get the metaphor I'm rolling with here. And the last point I'll make about why it's unhealthy, in my experience, to have goal-based sexual encounters is it puts a pressure on. It puts on a metric for success and failure. There is a success if I ejaculate and you ejaculate, and there's a failure if we don't. And that pressure, oh my god, like, how can you have a free-flowing, intimate, sexual, embodied, like, encounter with a person that feels good when there's this pressure of, like, you need to do this, you need to do this. Like, anyone who's had that, like, I don't know if you've had that or felt that feeling of needing to get somewhere in a sexual encounter. It feels like a heavy weight. I remember I've talked with so many guys because I've led a bunch of groups on sexual shame with men. And I remember one guy I talked to once, he had so much pressure from himself and from his partner to just be hard so that they could have intercourse. I remember I just talking to him, there's this image of, like, it felt like there was this massive 1,000-pound boulder on his dick. And, like, if his dick wasn't, it was like that much pressure for it to be erect. Okay, that's all I got for today. So I just wanted to introduce this video series. I wanted to put out some foundational ideas that viewing sex as an energy instead of an act I think is useful. And I wanted to, set the stage for the next couple videos that I'll make. My hope is that each video will stand alone, and I've never done anything like this before, so I also hope that I can, like, articulate each video as a standalone, and while they're also building on concepts from previous videos. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks for joining, and and if you have a desire to reach out to me for any reason, whether it's just to connect because you sense there's some, like, I don't know, kinship or synergy that could exist between us, hit me up. If you want to connect also to work with me, hit me up if that seems interesting or just talking about it, or any other reason, feel free to hit me up. Cool. That's all I got. Peace. Bear with me as I turn off the video. If I had time to do that spin, that would have been great, but I have to.